Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back. And if you are just tuning in with me for the very first time, it's so nice to meet you. And I'm really glad you're here with me today. I am your host, Heather Carey, nutritionist, chef, mom, and a woman who has been around the block with food. I want to open up about real food in relation to health, weight, and our bodies so you can make peace with what you eat. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Real Food Stories podcast. Today, I wanted to talk about self-care while caregiving because as a woman in midlife, yet another term came up for me that I had only heard of recently, and that is the sandwich generation. So the sandwich generation refers to middle-aged adults, often in their 40s and 50s, who are caring for both elderly parents and their own children at the same time, which, if you can do the math, can lead to a lot of stress and burnout. Going through perimenopause and menopause is hard enough as women, and I think that we're pretty just tapped out from that. So this is not the time for our self-care to slip, but unfortunately, for so many of us, it definitely can. So I'm bringing on an expert today to talk about how we can maintain our self-care and sanity while caring for others at the same time. So I wanted to introduce you to Jeanette Yates. Jeanette is a certified life coach, yoga instructor, meditation teacher, and a lifelong caregiver. As a founder of the Caregiver, she has dedicated her life to helping caregivers prioritize their own self-care and avoid burnout. Jeanette hosts the popular podcast From Guilt to Good, Self-Care Solutions for Busy Caregivers, where she shares her expertise and interviews other experts in the field of caregiving and self-care. And Jeanette's signature program, the Empowered Self-Caregiver Cohort, helps caregivers develop sustainable self-care practices tailored to their unique needs and circumstances. Her approach combines self-awareness, self-advocacy, self-compassion, and self-care to help caregivers rediscover their worth and reclaim their time. Welcome to the show, Jeanette. Thanks so much for being on here. And I know we have a lot to talk about. So I first wanted to just hear your story and how you got into this field. And I know this is so important now that I am at this age in midlife where I am sort of sandwiched between these two worlds.
Yeah. So it's interesting because my journey started before I became a sandwich generation caregiver. I was actually just a caregiver because my mom has been sick since I was about 8 years old. And so I grew up as a caregiver in some respects. Of course, it looks different as an adult than it did when I was a child, obviously, but there's been always a component of take care of mom. So I do have a husband, a family. I've raised two boys. They would like to tell me they're adults, but they're 20 and 18. So they still need a lot of help. And then my mom's care about 10 years ago my mom's health about 10 years ago took kind of that downhill turn to where she needed more and more care, to the point I was really in that sandwich where I'm doing all the mom things, I'm working, I'm taking care of my mom in some aspect every single day, multiple times a day. I'm going to her house, then we're hiring care, and I'm going to her house, and and then she's in a wheelchair, and then she's bedbound, and now she's in a nursing home. And so so that's my story in a nutshell. And what I learned, and the reason I started the Caregiver, is I realized that really self-care is only talked about in kind of platitudes in the caregiving space. Like, don't forget to put your mask on so that you can, before you put the mask on others. Like, I don't okay. What does that even mean?
Yeah, what does that even mean? I know that's a line that's so overused now.
Yes.
Right?
Or
make sure you take care of yourself before you can take care of others.
Yeah, it's like, you'll hear you can't pour from an empty cup, and it's like, yeah. You also can't pour from a broken cup, a cup with holes in it. I could take a metaphor. I'm a former English teacher. So I can take a metaphor and beat it into the ground. So don't get me started. But the bottom line is there's not enough real practical advice or suggestions or steps for people in this sandwich to use to actually take care of themselves. And to your point with your audience, we're already having to take everything that used to work for our care. We used to be able to work out X amount of time and eat XYZ and feel okay and like handle it and mix it in and it's fine. And then all the stuff that was working, it's not working anymore because we're going through perimenopause or menopause. And so we have to flip that script. And at the same time, we have to also add an additional component of caregiving that we weren't used to having. And by the way, our kids are going off to college. So we're an empty nest, but not. So there's all this stuff going on. And it's not a great time to just tell somebody like, don't forget to put on your mask. Like that's not helpful. So I wanted to come in and say, okay, this is what we mean when we say take care of yourself. So anyway, so what I try to do is so I started with myself and I looked at my own experience as a caregiver and said, okay, I am doing all of these things. I'm doing yoga. I'm reading my journal or reading my Bible or reading my, self-improvement book. I'm journaling. I'm breathing. I'm cooking all the things. I'm eating all the things. And I still feel like junk all the time. I'm not feeling any better. So I knew that it wasn't a matter of just doing some self-care thing that was like pre-prescribed by someone else. Like, oh, I really love this, or, oh, you should do this. It'll make you feel better, or that. What it really is about learning to listen to your body that is trying to tell you what it needs. Typically for caregivers, it's more sleep and more water. Just FYI, spoiler alert. And then doing those things. But even that isn't enough because no self-care is going to actually tend to your soul, tend to your body, tend to your mind if you don't believe that you deserve it or you are too distracted to be present in that moment. So what I teach my clients is listen to your body, do what it's telling you to do, be present in the moment, and remind yourself and really believe that you deserve the care that you're giving yourself. So that's what we do in my program.
Okay. So you're teaching real like actionable skills, right?
Yeah.
And to get out of the mindset,
right.
I think of thinking that you have to do it all.
Right.
Is that correct?
Right. Yeah. I was speaking with a caregiver the other day and she said, I just, I feel so guilty because I had to, my loved one had to be cared for by somebody else. Like I couldn't do it. And I said, well, does that mean you're not a caregiver or does that mean you as the family caregiver recognized what was going to be best for your loved one and you got the care they needed? To me, that's a good caregiver. Instead of thinking, no, if I'm not doing it myself, that doesn't count. When really the goal is not for us to always be the person doing, it's to facilitate what's best for our loved one. I could go on about and and there's a bunch in that, but like in general, it's this idea of like, let's redefine what it means to be a caregiver. Let's understand what we have the capacity to do, and then doing enough and letting that be enough.
So it sounds like there's no straight definition of caregiving because what I think in my head, when I think of caregiving, you're just like selfless, right? You're just outputting, you're burning out, but that's how it's supposed to be, right? You're supposed to just be this just pool of energy that just gives. And
and that is the definition that a lot of people, that's the unwritten definition is, your parents gave to you. So now it's your time to pay them back, which of course no one's going to, that's just kind of the idea that people have. But what's interesting, we were talking before we hopped on, depending on where you grew up in the country or where you grew up in the world, what it means to be a caregiver is completely different. So, for some people, it's like find the best place for them to, find the best assisted living facility. And in other areas, it's, restructure your entire home to allow for the person to move in. And it just kind of depends, in some cases it's, your loved one living with you, or you quitting your job, or you moving in with them. It's the actual, like what you need to do, like the task or the responsibilities is really different for each person. So what I like to do is pull it all the way back and say, okay, what this looks like is going to be different for every family, but you really can, as a caregiver, just say, my job as a caregiver is to give or facilitate the best care for my loved one without losing myself. And I think one thing that's been missing is we've just been saying, either I got to give my loved one the best care, period. It doesn't matter if I go bankrupt and physically ill all the time, lose my family, lose my, am uncomfortable, whatever they need, I have to do it. I think we just stop there and we don't consider ourselves or our family members as part of the equation. So, like I have children and a husband who also I am in relationship with. And when I'm caregiving for my loved one, that pulls me out of being able to be in relationship with my husband and my children, then that's a problem. That's not healthy. And so learning to do what is in your capacity to do, and that changes, you have to constantly assess, like, what is my capacity right now? What do they need right now? And how can I serve them the best? And sometimes that means not doing everything yourself.
So what if you are the person who has to do everything, or how do you set those boundaries? I mean, you can't I just know some people, that are just, I think you mentioned before that, like, that's just what you do. Your parents get older and now you have to give back to them.
Right.
Then and then also you have your children, right? And of course you're giving
Right.
to them. That's like I guess a
Right.
given. That's your responsibility. So how do you set, it's easy to say, I'm just gonna have boundaries or limits on how much I can do
Right.
everything. But what if, like, you physically need to be there, and I don't know, how do you
Right.
work that out without like totally burning out?
Well, so, and it was when you were reading my bio, I was like, oh, I might need to change that, because I've had a, realization, because I was burned out and then I got out of burnout. And then, so a lot of times I'm like, I help people avoid burnout. And it's like, well, really, you know, when you're trying to figure out what you can do and how it's going to work and all this kind of stuff, there's a lot of variables that are shifting. We talked about that: menopause, kids going to, you know, kids at different stages, parents, their health is up and down, and, who knows. So even, when you get something figured out, it changes. You may like get pretty close to burnout. You may experience that fatigue, that overwhelm. And so what we really want to start with is when you're realizing, okay, I'm doing all I can do. And this is, I'm starting to crack. Like we all feel that. A lot of times I think we don't look at all of the options available to us because of the role that we play in our family. So, if we are the ones that, maybe our parent prefers to care, for, in my case, my mom's only child. So like, it is what it is. So there was a long time where I was like, well, I mean, I'm the only one, so I'm the one that has to do it. Well, eventually what happened is I had to be able to say to myself and to my mother, yes, you need more than what I'm giving you right now. but I cannot give it. So we are going to have to think outside the box and come up with another plan. And as the caregiver, as the family caregiver, primary caregiver, whatever you want to call it, I had to help my mom figure out what other options are available to her. And so that's where the boundary starts, is sometimes it's just a conversation. It's just I'm not saying you don't need it. I'm saying I can't provide it. Either physically, for me, it was like physically, I couldn't do it. But also, like I have to work 8 hours, I have to work 40 hours a week,
And you have your
therefore
kids,
I can't
and
be here.
you have your family.
Yeah. Right. And so, sometimes it's just that, and I think having that first boundary of being able to say, yes, they need something. I can't, I'm providing at my capacity. Like I can't do any more right now. Like maybe in the future, like that's another thing. Things can change. But when you've hit that capacity or you're hovering near it, you have to include yourself in the equation. That's really all I'm asking caregivers to do, is like, include yourself in the equation, include your family in this equation.
So I know a lot of people would feel guilty having that conversation, and I'm just curious, how did your mom receive that conversation? Was she open to having it? Because I would imagine that there's people who that's just not really an option to have it, and then they would feel guilty even saying that to their parents.
Well, one of the things, it's really interesting that you say this, because I just did a workshop on how to say no and mean it, but also not feel like you're being mean. So it basically addresses this thing. And of course, for me, the conversations pretty much always happened with my mother because I'm the only person. But sometimes these conversations have to happen with your siblings, with your spouse, with your children, like depending on who's part of the care team for your parent, your aging parent. So I think, to be perfectly honest, this was not one conversation. This was a series of conversations. This was a series of broaching the subject, listening to my mom, like a lot of times, sometimes our aging parents kind of disguise things to where it doesn't look like what it is. And you're like, wait, what is really going on here? So sometimes we have to get to the root of the thing. So like my mom would, want me to come over every night for dinner, let's say, okay, or at dinner time, not for dinner. And really, I'm like, what? Like, why? Like, she has the food. Like, I didn't understand. And really, she didn't need dinner. She needed, she felt lonely, or and then eventually there was a little component of, well, I can't really get dinner, but I don't want to say anything. So if I just say, something else, then, so sometimes it's a matter of like finding, like, what are they really needing here, and adjusting that a little bit, like working with that first, and then working more into that conversation of like, okay, I can do X, here are all the things that you need on a weekly, monthly daily basis, right? These are the things that I can do and not burn out. Now, of course, in the short term, emergencies happen, things, flip the table when we have to go all in and we're up at the emergency room all night or whatever. But we can't do that consistently. So we want to have a place where we're like, yes, I can come over once a day, or, I can do XYZ. This is something manageable. But beyond this, we're going to need to get some additional support. Now, if you have family that is, willing, or maybe not willing, but is at least around, you can have those hard conversations with them. Like I said, it doesn't have to be one conversation. It's more about like, hey guys, I am burning out. I know that I'm the primary, of all the siblings, I'm the one that does the most care, and I'm still willing to do that. But I'm just telling you, I'm at my, like, I can't do any more than this. I'm already doing XYZ. I can't do any more. Can we readjust the duties here a little bit, or hire additional help if that's appropriate and available to you. So there's a lot of different strategies and ways to broach this, where it's not just like one day you're burning out, you're deep in the pit of overwhelm and despair, and the next day you've got beautiful boundaries and everyone is happy and well-rounded and all that kind of stuff. That's not how boundaries work. That's not how we work. We just need to start, I'm not a big manifest it, blah, blah. I'm not really big into that, but the idea of just explore the idea in your brain of saying no, or I can't, or not now, or later, any of those, just explore the idea and then say, if I could say no to one thing, what would it be? That's what I always tell my caregivers that I work with. You don't have to say no to all the things, because when you're drowning, you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted. And you're just wanting to shut it all down. I don't know if any caregiver resonates with this, or any person that's listening. Maybe you don't even consider yourself a caregiver. Maybe you're just overwhelmed in general. Have you ever just wanted to get in your car and drive until you couldn't,
oh yeah,
just drive and drive and drive, right? For some people, they're like, no, I hate driving. I don't know. Maybe for, it's I want to go to the beach and walk as long as I can, or I want to, go to the museum and be enveloped in the beautiful painting, whatever, right? We all have that, get me the heck out of here. I can't stand it anymore. Okay. Yes. We want to throw everything out, but that's not possible. We live in the real world. We do take care of other people as part of our existence as humans. If you could stop doing one thing, what would it be? And then to circle back on the guilt, that could be a whole different series. Actually, that's what my podcast is about. We talk about it.
You have to tune into your podcast to find out.
Yeah, tune into my podcast, From Guilt to Good, because that's the hardest part. Is well, I would do it. I really want to say no to this one thing. If I have to do this thing one more time, I'm going to go nuts. But then if I say I don't want to do it, I feel guilty. Well, I have some news for you. In order to not feel guilty, you just have to do it. You just have to practice saying no, and then reminding yourself that you're a person worthy of the same attention, the same care, the same breath, the same life as you want for the people around you, your children, your parents, whoever. So a lot of it is, and if you want to do deep work, you dig a little bit deeper as to why are you feeling guilty? So for me, it was I'm never doing enough. I'm never, and then if I'm already not doing enough and I do less, then I'm going to feel a little bit even guiltier. But then I flipped that and I said, you know what? I'm doing everything I can. I'm burning it out. I'm just balls to the wall, whatever you want to say. And it's not enough. So since it's not enough, if I did one less thing, still not going to be enough. What is one thing? What is the one thing? Either way, I was going to have that guilt for a while. So I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to do one less thing. And then I saw that the sky didn't fall, that things still got taken care of. I didn't stop giving her meds. That wasn't the one thing, right?
Right.
You have to be practical. But, there's always the one thing. And then you just start reminding yourself of things that are true. Yes, your loved one needs care. So do you. It's just practicing.
Yeah, it's a good, I guess, time to explore your own worthiness. That you are also worthy of care. And it's not just about everybody else around you, which I think a lot of women grow up believing, right? That we're just the output. But I loved how you said that, just to how to say no, just to start by exploring the idea, right? So you don't have to just jump in and
no,
that's it. I'm not doing this, or just no, and then be overtaken with guilt, or you can just start by kind of circling around it and explore what it would feel like to say no to one or two things.
Right.
And
a lot of times, we feel like the boundary is about what the other person is doing. Like we have to stop them from doing something. And really another thing is, no, the boundary has nothing to do with them. It's all about what you are willing to do or not do. And how they respond is really irrelevant. Now, obviously, we want to be kind in the world, but it's not your job to make sure other people, like to change other people's behavior. This is about your behavior. So think about what you want your behavior to be, and then set the boundary around that. Also, when we talked about capacity, that's another thing. It's like, once you figure out what your capacity is, this said that, in my program, that's what we do. We like, what is your capacity? Are you working over it? And 99% of the time, people are like, yeah, I'm way over. So you figure out your capacity, and then you build your boundary to protect that capacity. So that you are not constantly going over it. And then another thing, we talk about metaphors. That boundary is not a wall. It is not a big, or it doesn't have to be. It may be eventually, some boundaries have to be walls. When we're talking about the boundaries you need in caregiving, this is a gate, this is a fence with a gate, you
can open and close it, right?
You can open and close it. That is up to you, because the boundary is about you, not about what the other person does. So, a lot of times when somebody starts banging on our gate, we would just want to be like, stop it, la, 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 and go open the gate. Well, really what we need to do is be like, nope, that's why the gate's there, to keep people from busting through. And I'm not going to go adjust that gate. And then other times, the gate does need to be open, and you do need to go over and do the thing, right? But I think too, we think, oh, if I set this boundary, then, like my first boundary I talk about in the Say No workshop was like, I'm not going to come over every night at dinner. I'm going to be with my family for dinner. Well, obviously, if there's an emergency and she's, fallen on the floor, I'm not going to be like, nope, sorry, it's dinner time, and my boundary is that I don't come over at dinner time. No, you go over, you help them out,
Right, of course.
Yeah. It's like, that's the gate, right? So with caregiving, you have to do that. And that's what makes it a little bit harder for, because like when we're, setting boundaries with, people we don't want in our lives anymore, it's like no contact, right? Well, obviously we don't do that with caregiving. But so those are just a few things to think about. Like, the boundary is not about separating you. It's about enabling you to have a better relationship, not only with your loved one that you're caring for, but also the other people in your life and yourself.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Boundaries really are, it's not about them. It's not about fixing them or
right.
Boundaries are for you.
Yeah.
And that takes some exploration of what those boundaries are. And I mean, this takes a lot of exploring, right? And again, because if you've grown up in a certain way with certain beliefs, and this is what you're supposed to do, and of course you're supposed to take care of your parents and be selfless and burn out, then it sounds like it takes some inner work, right? To really get in touch with your guilt and your emotions around setting boundaries in the first place.
Yeah. And I think one thing I learned, and it was something I learned as I went through recovery from my own disordered eating issues and stuff when I was younger, is a lot of what is going on in that is trying to avoid feeling a certain way. Like, I don't want to feel that way, so I'm going to do this to try to not feel this way. When really I had to learn, the feeling is not going to kill me. What I am doing to try to avoid feeling that way may actually hurt me or, be devastating. And so I feel like the same thing kind of happens in caregiving, is we don't want to feel guilty. We don't want to feel like we're disappointing our family. We don't want to feel, we don't want to make anybody mad, especially if you grew up as a people pleaser and you're the fixer in the family. And really, we have to just learn that, like, yeah, that's going to take some time to like work all the way through, but also feeling that way isn't going to kill you. It's just uncomfortable. Learning to be uncomfortable for a few minutes, or even, like I used to say no to my mom, like that whole, like I'm not coming over at dinner time. And she may, I get like a ton of texts or phone calls or whatever, please, and it was like, I would be really stressed out, and it would be and I would wonder, am I doing the right thing or not? But I sat in it because I really felt like it was important to be home with my family. Right. And I learned that she was still going to be okay. Right. She was still going to be fine. I began to feel less uncomfortable the more I practiced, and I started to experience some fun stuff with my family, so that I wasn't focused on what I wasn't doing. I was focused on what I was doing. So I think that was another thing too, that kind of got me over that guilt. But sometimes, that space of that discomfort is so uncomfortable, we don't even want to deal with it. When really we just can say, no, I'm going to try this. And this is another thing. You can always make a different choice. If you set the boundary and it's terrible and horrible, and you've tried it and it's just miserable, and you're miserable and they're miserable, and everybody's miserable, you can adjust the boundary. I wouldn't recommend taking it down altogether, but you can adjust it. It's all about practice. But the idea that we can never say no, or the idea that there's selfish and selfless and nothing in between, is also kind of not right either. I don't think there's like, you're either wholly selfless or you make one choice that's different than that and you're completely selfish.
Right.
I think there's a center, and that's that's a perfectly appropriate place to be.
Right. Yeah. And that takes, again, I think going back to like that mindset, it just takes a certain or a shift in thinking because of how maybe we were raised. And, I love how you just said, like, that your feelings are okay. Like feelings can feel overwhelming and scary, but they're just feelings. They will come and they will go, they will pass. And it's okay to feel all of it. Right. Yeah. And knowing that they will not absorb you and kill you.
Right. Well, and like, like I think it's so interesting that a lot of times I think we feel guilty because we have taken someone else's expectation, whether it's our parents or maybe it's just like the people that you live around or what you grew up with or whatever. And you're like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. And it's like, did you even ask your parents if that's what they want? Like, do you even know? Like, I remember when I first got married to my husband, like his mother was like super organized and dinner on the table, all this kind of stuff, And so I thought like I had to do that too, because I was like, well, that's what he grew up with. It must be what he wants. And so like every day I'm like hustling, trying to like figure out how to cook. Wish I'd have known you. And like get it all on the table by the time he got home from work. And he was like, like, why are you like, you don't have to do this, right? Like, that like I can eat dinner at 7. I don't have to eat it at 6. Like I'm not starving to death. And I was like, oh, I thought this was like your expectation. He's like, no, that's what my mom did. And that was fine, but you don't have to be my mom. Like you don't have to do everything exactly the same way. And so I think we can also like the caregivers in your mind that maybe the way your parents took care of their loved ones, or, your community or your extended family, like that does not have to be the same for you. You can create your own caregiving definition, your own, and it can evolve and change. It's okay. It's okay to make, different.
Yeah, no, good point. I mean, same as just even raising your kids, right? You don't have to do it the same way your parents did it for you, and even, like, I don't know, in just the stage of life we're in right now, and like menopause and perimenopause and stuff, we can do things differently, not by like society standards, or even just how we learn like our mothers were doing it. So
Right.
yeah, we can flip the switch and think outside the box.
Yeah, this is not midlife crisis time. This is midlife awakening. We're finally like, just step into it. Because it's, this is a great time in your life to finally not be afraid and do what you know, and with perimenopause and menopause, your body is really talking to you. It's really telling you what it wants.
Yeah,
And
it
so
really
listen.
is. Yes. Yes, exactly. So, saying no to your loved ones and what if that doesn't get received very well? I mean, can you still is there hope to just still maintain a relationship? Like your example, your mom wanted you to come over every single night for dinner and that might feel like, great, I'm setting my own boundary. I'm saying no,
Right.
look at me. I'm I'm preserving my sanity. But what if the person on the other end doesn't receive that well? How do you maintain that relationship and still say no?
Okay. So, couple things. One, every situation is different. And I'm not advocating that you do anything that you feel is not appropriate or dangerous or anything like that. In my situation, I knew that me not going over to my mom's house during the dinner hour, couple hours, was not going to be a detriment to her care. It was not unsafe. It just was not something she preferred. Okay. So that's where I started my boundaries. Does that make sense? So that
Absolutely.
is where I would advocate you start your boundaries. Is we're not talking about, like, you know, a care issue. This is like,
Neglecting her for days and like keeping her like
right. This
imprisoned
is
in a
like,
room. Right.
you know, I'm going to do. And so, and then just like we talked about with boundaries a few minutes ago, how she felt about the boundary was really irrelevant.
True. Right.
I know that sounds rough. I know that sounds like, you know, but, you know, first of all, explaining, Mom, I'm not going to come over every night at dinner because, and you don't really, like, some people would say, you don't even have to say because you can just set the boundary. But, especially if you're trying to like not be mean, you'd say, you know, dinner time is really the only time we're all home, you know, and so I really want to be there so I can hear about how my kids are doing, make sure they got their homework and check. At the time this was going on, they were still, you know, they could be home alone, but still like, we need to make sure we're getting homework done and stuff. As my husband, this is really the only time that we're all together in a way that's not busy. So I'm going to start doing this. Now, how can we set you up for success while I'm not here? And then, she said, well, blah, 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 blah. And so I helped her find solutions for the things that she was saying that she needed me there for. So instead of me coming over to prepare her meal, it was like, well, the caregiver that's here during the day, before she leaves at 5 o'clock, she needs to make sure your meal is ready for you. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
And then how my mom felt about, like, after I've done all I can do, I've set the boundary, how she felt about it, I had to let go of. That was not my responsibility, her feeling. We can be kind, but we're still not responsible for other people's feelings. We cannot change the way other people feel or what they do. So, I think that's one thing we also, I used to say all the time, like, I just want my mom to be happy. But sometimes what made them happy, first of all, it wasn't the safe thing, for her. It wasn't the healthy thing for her. And so instead of saying, well, I just want my mom to be happy, I said, well, I just want my mom to be safe. I just want her to be healthy. And if she can be safe and healthy and happy, yay. But those are the things that I had to focus on. And, of course, this is all this is oversimplification. This is a process. This is something that you have to really ponder and think about. I do have a way, one of the things that I do offer is like a session where I help you figure out what that boundary is. Like, what's the first boundary you can set realistically? It's probably not the one you want to set, the big one that you're like, oh yeah, I need a boundary right there. That's probably not the first one, but there's probably one that we can set. And so because every situation is different. Your relationship with your parent may be good, maybe not so good. Maybe there's a little history there that has to be dealt with too. So there's a lot of that as well. And also, full disclosure, I was in therapy. So I had a really good therapist. So that is also very helpful.
Right. So. Yeah. That's, I mean, it sounds like, great. Depending on the level of your relationship and where you're at, that it might require therapy, but you provide the skills. And I think the direct line into just caregiving. Yeah. So I have one just last question. I know at the very beginning, you just mentioned journaling and, all those self-care giving like things, that might work and might not work. So do you have like a self-care, like a toolbox of self-care things? Because I know what works for some people doesn't work for others. I'm a huge journaler. I love to journal and vent into my journal, but some people are like, no, thanks. So what are the top like self-care giving things that you would just write? I mean, I know this is probably,
I know it's fine. It's like, the answer is it depends, but I'll also give you an answer. Okay. Yeah. So I would say, one thing I hear all the time is like, I want to do more, I want to work out. I want to eat better. Blah, blah, blah. I'm just so tired. I can't, and it's like, okay, especially if you're burned out or close to burned out or overwhelmed caregiver, or mom who's in midlife and is trying to figure everything out. If you're listening to your body and all it is telling to you is take a nap, get more sleep, take a nap, get more sleep, chances are that is the self-care that you need first. So the first thing I recommend for most overwhelmed caregivers is, are you getting enough sleep? And it really doesn't matter how long you're in bed. I need to know, you want to know, are you sleeping? And, there's a lot of tools out there. I wear a Whoop that tells me how good my sleep was. But, when you wake up in the morning, do you feel like you're refreshed? Do you not, that kind of thing. So first of all, just try adjusting your sleep routine. And really, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Either go to bed a little early, get up a little later. Somebody said, how do you get enough sleep? That was something somebody asked me on, Instagram the other day. And I was like, hey, you know what? You know how I get enough sleep? I prioritize it.
Right.
That's the end. That's it.
Yeah.
So that's number one, sleep, sleep, sleep. The second thing is hydration and then nutrition, kind of in conjunction with each other. If you are eating things that are not making your body happy, if you're not getting enough water, then all the other things just fall apart. Okay. If you're not getting enough sleep, first of all, that's the thing, you can go without water and food for longer than you can without sleep, without it having permanent damage. So, and it's a lot harder to recoup. So if you've gone without food or water and then you hydrate and eat, your body recovers faster than with that sleep deficit. So sleep first, nutrition and water, and then movement is my fourth thing. And when I say movement, I mean any movement. It does not have to be on a treadmill. It does not have to be some kind of formal routine. Just move your body. Dancing in the kitchen counts. Dancing in the shower counts. Just be careful with the slippery. But yeah, those are my four things.
Okay. Yeah. So sleep, hydration, nutrition, movement. Yes. I mean, right. Things we should all be doing anyway.
Yeah.
But I know
it's the same for our children. It's the same for our parents. It's the same for us.
Same when we're just going through the menopause transition, everything, right? All these things become just really, even I don't know if they become more important. They have always been very important. But really, I think it's an opportunity to remember that we need to.
Yeah, it's a time to double down on what we already know is helpful.
Yes.
Instead of saying, I'm going to push it to the side because this is more important. We have to say no, because this is important. Caregiving for our parent, tending to our children, working, having our career, because those things are important. I need to take care of myself, and I need to sleep, hydrate, eat, and move daily.
Yes. Great. Okay. Well, so beyond that, right. Go get a massage and go read. These are the core.
Oh yeah. Please do all those things too.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jeanette, thank you so much. I really appreciate you just having this in-depth conversation with me. I think it's definitely needed. People don't really talk about this. Not, it's sort of a secret hidden thing that we have to be taking care of so much for so many people, and then also try to focus on ourselves at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
and for a long time, it was like after your kids are gone and into adulthood, then you start taking care of your parents. Well, that's not the way it is anymore too. I think that's another reason it feels more like secret. You're like, wait, I'm not done doing this one thing, and now it's time to do this. And oh, by the way, I'm going through menopause. Like, I think it's part of that's the sandwich just isn't about having one thing on one side and one thing on the other. It's also about that squeeze
right
in the middle.
Yes. No, I know. When I first heard that, the sandwich generation, was like, oh no, what's that? Like really, it's no one prepares you for this, for a lot of this stuff, right? They don't prepare you for empty nesting. They don't prepare you for menopause, and they don't prepare you for having to take care of your parents at the same time as you're taking care of so many other things. And you're still well into your career, and you're still living. So it's a lot that this time of our lives there's a lot going on. So we really need
but you're here and I'm here and we're here to help, right?
Absolutely.
That's why we're banging the drum. So
yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
It's been
a wonderful conversation.
Yeah. And just tell me just quickly, how can people get in touch with you? And I'll link anything in the show notes too.
Well, of course, on Instagram, I'm the Self Caregiver. I'm on there a lot, hang out there all the time. If you go there and find my, there's the link to the podcast and all that over there. And then also, since I mentioned it, I'll make sure you have the link to the Say No workshop that people can sign up for as well. And so they can get that and the resources that come with that as well, because there's a workbook and video training and some different things that'll help them. We talk about that first boundary, all those things. So I'll make sure you have that as well.
Great. That sounds like something people definitely will need. Love it. Okay. Well, thank you so much, and carry on.
Yeah.
And as always, if you loved this podcast, please consider gifting me with a 5-star review. It is so helpful for me to get the word out on real eating, our real bodies, and real food stories. Thank you so much and have a great week. Bye for now.